Oh, also quick disclaimer. Everything you see in the frame is educational. It's not sexy. It's educational because Lance is an artist and we are looking at the work of Lance, the artist. None of the people you're seeing except for the two of us are real, so everybody just stay calm.
All right. The question is whether Donald Trump has changed his story. Now, what happened was this. According to Wikipedia, his son initially, like within a day or two, said that it was a meeting about adoptions, Russian adoptions. And then he quickly changed. Like within 2 or 3 days, he said, no, actually, they had called the meeting with him because they said they were going to give him some Oppo research, some dirt on Hillary. And that's why he went to the meeting. Now, so he admitted that. And this is according to Wiki, and this is in 2017. Now, on July 12th, President Trump, July 12th, 2017, President Trump gave an interview with Reuters where he reiterated that he had only known about the meeting for a couple of days.
Well, after the meeting.
Yeah. And that, quote unquote, many people would have held that meeting. Meaning, then he said he praised his son for his transparency. So, I couldn't find a perfect quote, so I have to explain this. His son transparently had already admitted the sequence of events, that it was to get Oppo research on Hillary Clinton, and here on July 12th, in an interview with Hannity, the president praises him for his transparency, meaning that he's admitted what the real reason was and that many people would have held that meeting. So he's not contradicting himself now. The story that his son gave has been the official story all along. What is happening is the media is trying to convince Rick that Trump has changed his story. There's more. Giuliani recently said, a week ago, he said this. He said, collusion is not illegal. Now, the media jumped on Giuliani and they said, so, aha, that means there must be collusion. Again, all Giuliani was saying was there was no collusion with the Russians. He said that a zillion times. But even if there was, it's not illegal. So there's no legal basis for the investigation. But the media is trying to convince Rick that Giuliani was actually admitting that there was collusion. So what I find astonishing is not only are they misquoting Trump and Giuliani, but they're trying to spin this weird story where Giuliani's basically admitting to collusion, Trump is actually changing his story, and Rick, who has the second highest IQ in America, comes in here and says, aha, Trump changed his story, and he's buying it. So it's really sad to me that the media can't just say what happened. Do they have to? In other words, if the Democrats are as wonderful as you guys think they are, why do they have to lie?
All right, so hold on. Okay, so we've all heard, anybody who's listened to any of this stuff on CNN or Fox or wherever you get your news has heard a million times that collusion isn't illegal. But that there are underlying things or things related to collusion that may be illegal, depending on what actually happened. And one of the issues remains, and we don't have any evidence one way or the other on this, except for circumstantial stuff that's being floated by non-official people. The Trump must have known about the meeting. Now, he hasn't changed his story on that.
He said from the
He's
very
always
beginning
said that he didn't know
about
about it. But people are wondering whether, well, Cohen is saying that Trump knew about the meeting.
He also said that he didn't know about it.
Yeah, first he said he didn't, and then he said he did.
Now that he's facing a lengthy term in prison, he's decided that he did.
Yeah, so, I mean...
By the way, did you want to say something else?
I don't know, so I guess I'm not sure the issue is whether or not Trump changed his story, though there may be some problems with Don Jr. changing his story 2 days after he said the meeting was for one thing, but it was really, I don't know. And I'm not perfectly well versed on all this stuff, but there still may be an issue about whether or not, Trump did know about the meeting, when it happened or shortly before it was due to happen, and whether Trump helped formulate Don Jr.'s statement about the nature of the meeting.
Well, none of that's important.
Well, if
none of it is illegal and none of it matters.
Well, yeah, you guys say that.
Well, what I mean, does it matter?
It depends on who Don Jr. was saying stuff to. If he was saying it to, we all know from Martha Stewart and other people that it's illegal to lie to the FBI in the course of an investigation. I believe that's how it works. Did Don Jr. lie to the FBI or to some other agency or some other...
No, he admitted all this to reporters.
Yeah, but if he... I don't know if Don Jr. is on the hook or not.
Let me ask you a question. Are you curious as to whether Hillary knew that she was paying the Russians for a dossier that claimed that that Trump was in a hotel room watching prostitutes pee? Does that interest you at all?
Some.
Good.
But Hillary's not president.
Well, I'm just saying that we have a law in this country that goes for everybody, not just Republicans.
So your argument is that two wrongs negate each other.
No, my argument is Trump did nothing wrong, but I'm just amazed that if his son has a meeting with somebody that claims to have Oppo research on Hillary, you're just vitally important to you. But if Hillary actually pays $100,000 to the Kremlin to write a dossier saying that Trump was in a hotel room going to orgies, that's of no interest to you. You don't want any investigating on that.
Aren't they already investigating that?
No.
Director, aren't they investigating?
No. Well, they're trying to. But there's no special prosecutor.
They are investigating.
Well, the House Intelligence Committee is trying to find out more about it, but you've never said you want information about it. No one in the press wants any information.
This is one of those deals where you got to Google this stuff yourself.
Well, no, you don't have to. I can tell you the answer to all these questions.
Yeah, but also the relative.
There's no special investigator.
No, what I'm saying you have to Google. Hold on, is the relative legality or illegality in potential illegality in each instance. What the Democrats did and Hillary did versus what Trump and Trump Jr. may have done.
Well, it's not illegal to have a meeting with someone that says they have dirt on your opponent.
If they're giving you dirt and they are connected to a foreign government.
Yeah, no, that's not illegal.
That's not what I hear.
No, it's not illegal. If the president of North Korea called up Donald Trump and said, I've got dirt on Hillary, he could have that meeting. What is illegal is lying to a judge with a dossier full of lies and using that dossier to get permission to surveil your opponent.
What you guys like to say is that it's all the dossier. The dossier said all this stuff.
It doesn't matter if it's all the dossier or part of the dossier. And the most recent release was that the dossier made up the majority in all 4 cases. All 4 times
that they got the FISA warrant.
That they got the FISA warrant, the dossier was the most important factor.
And there were plenty of disclaimers with the dossier.
No, there were not. No, there were not.
So something that is illegal is Paul Manafort. And,
Good, let's move on.
No, I have something important to say about that.
Yes.
On the first day, the Justice Department, the prosecutors, said, none of this we will not bring up anything about collusion with Russia, about Trump's collusion with Russia. This is purely a case of IRS fraud of Manafort 10 years ago.
Nobody's disputing that.
Well, no, it's vitally important because the whole purpose of this case is so that Mueller can squeeze Manafort into saying something bad about Trump. That's the only reason for it. Other people don't face 300 years in prison, and it is 300 years. Manafort is facing 305 years in prison because of tax fraud from a case that occurred in 2005.
So how many years?
And it's only being brought, it has nothing to do with Russian collusion. And now they've admitted it in court.
Well, okay, but how many years in prison should he face for hiding $16 million in income from the government so he didn't have to pay taxes on that?
It's irrelevant.
But
I don't care.
I
don't care. It's very important, Rick.
And is it weird that you look so much like frickin' Manafort?
Let me say something, Rick.
He looks like Manafort, right?
What's interesting to me is that now they're going after this guy for the whole purpose of shaking him down the same way they're going after Cohen, so that hopefully they will say something bad about Trump. This is not, to me, this is not how the justice system should work in this.
Well, if you're investigating people and you unearth evidence of a crime, don't you put him on trial for that crime?
Well,
he hid $16 million.
These were already issued. These had already been gone into. And by the way, the judge in Manafort's case said the same thing. You can forget about Lance Richland, the marble sculptor. The judge in the case said, you're just using this to get Trump.
Can I make a quick comment and
okay.
ask you all to some feedback?
Okay.
Nobody can come to Rick Rosner or Lance Richland and say, I'm gonna, you're in trouble for tax evasion. The only person that can press charges on you is a U.S. attorney or the assistant to a U.S. attorney. And U.S. attorneys are appointed by the president. So Mueller wasn't appointed by the president, and yet he's bringing charges to Paul Manafort. Do you think that from that point alone, it's legal what Mueller is doing?
Okay, I don't really understand your point.
He's saying that Mueller is not an authorized agent.
Yes.
He doesn't have the right authorization to bring charges.
Well, this is actually being prosecuted, as I understand it, by the attorney in Virginia. And Mueller was investigating it when it has nothing to do with Trump. It is under the jurisdiction of Virginia where the crime occurred. So it's basically what Mueller is doing is he's looking around anywhere he can. He's going after Trump's attorney, which is, how will there ever be attorney-client privilege in the future? From now on, when you tell something to your attorney, if you're a Republican, the Democrats will go after your attorney to try to get you to lie, your attorney to lie about you or make up something. So, in other words, I don't like the way Mueller's going after Manafort in an unrelated case and going after Trump's attorney in both cases in order to blackmail them. These are white-collar guys. They don't want to spend the rest of their life in prison. How why wouldn't they make up something about Trump? This is not justice.
It seems a little like the plot of The Untouchables.
Okay. They got Al Capone on tax fraud and tax evasion, which is true. But Trump didn't do any of these things. All they're doing is going after their friends in the hope that they'll say something bad about him.
So, when was this tax evasion done? What year?
2005, before he even met Trump.
And do you
Manafort's tax thing occurred in 2005.
And do you know who the director of the FBI was?
I believe it was Mueller. And Mueller didn't do anything about it then.
No, I don't think Mueller knew about it in 2005.
No, they knew about it. They knew about it.
How do you know he knew about it?
It was, I believe this case didn't go anywhere. It was already brought up. And my point is this, if Manafort was a spy of some kind, and if Carter Page was a spy, why didn't Mueller stop him? Why is Carter Page still walking around? You have to remember, all 4 FISA warrants were brought up against Carter Page. Carter Page was going to be surveilled because that gives the FBI the right to surveil everyone he talks to and everyone they talk to. Now, Carter Page, no charges were ever brought against him. Carter Page actually helped the FBI in a capture Russian spies.
Are you saying that the FBI made a deal with Carter Page?
Yes. Carter Page worked for the CIA and the FBI in trials in the past or in the recent decade to actually put Russians in jail. Then the FBI comes up with this idea, we're going to go after Carter Page so we can surveil him and that way get through to the Trump campaign. And it turns out they didn't have anything on Carter Page because Carter Page is still walking amongst us. No charges were ever brought against him.
That doesn't mean they didn't have anything on him.
Well, but that means they didn't have anything on him, Rick. The Justice Department and the FBI couldn't find anything. So 4 times they went to the court telling the court we need to surveil Carter Page, and they never found anything, and each time they were able to surveil Trump.
I don't know. I'm not
Well, that is what happened. And what bothers me is how outrageous it is. They picked a guy that was innocent, that they knew was innocent. They lied to the court about why they needed it. And then this was going to give them the right to surveil Obama's enemy, Trump.
I don't know, but let's move on from that. And what's the next thing here? Should we talk about the future?
Go ahead.
Okay. The deal is, I spend a lot of time thinking about the future. Though, not necessarily in the most accurate. Well, nobody's good at predicting the future, and it gets harder and harder because the future just gets more and more complicated. There are only a few science fiction writers who have even attempted to present a fairly complete picture of what the future might look like. Charles Stross with Accelerando, Neil Stephenson with Snow Crash and The Diamond Age, the guy who wrote The Wind-Up Girl, Paulo somebody. There just aren't that many novels but it's just so complicated. There was a show that ran for a season on Netflix called Altered Carbon. But it's set 300 years in the future, and it's another one of those shows that has the trappings of the future, but really doesn't attempt to think about the future very much at all. The only thing that goes on in the future, it's like Westworld, that you can take the contents of their consciousness out of their skulls and put it in somebody else's skull. But everything else is kind of the same. People still live the same kind of lives. People still have the same kinds of sex. It's still the rainy streets the gritty urban environment that you see in Blade Runner. It's not the same way Star Trek isn't a complete picture of the future. Most shows just don't do it. But I thought we would take a look at one of the better future timelines and see the implications, see if you agree with some of the predictions and see what their implications might be. Because most political arguments, I think, are slippery slope arguments. If we let this happen, then this might happen, we might be overrun with immigrants, we might become, eyebrows deep in socialism, and I believe that the slippery slope arguments that I believe in mostly pertain to technology. That most of the weirdness that we're going to be hit with isn't immigrants, isn't socialism, except as things are affected by vast changes in technology in the next 80, 100, 200 years. You go ahead.
Well, the only thing that I'm really amazed by is that it looks like people are not going to have the same experience of sickness, ill health, and death that they've had since the beginning of time. And there can be no doubt that they will cure spinal injuries,
cancers.
Cancers. I was going to say Alzheimer's disease, but I couldn't remember the word. And I think that it's making people. One of the things I've noticed is that people do things to themselves now that they would not have done in the past because they think medical science will cure them. Like, for example, this is a little thing, but I've noticed that people are getting tattoos that they don't really like, knowing that someday they'll be able to remove it. I've noticed.
Why would somebody get it? I think 80% of tattoos are ill-advised.
I think they're all ill-advised.
Why would somebody get a tattoo that they don't like?
Well, what I'm saying is people think that no matter what they do to themselves, they'll be some doctor will be able to fix it. Like, for example, these big, huge ear things that they stick in. Well, apparently there's an operation now that if you completely deform your earlobe, they can actually cut it and trim it down and put it back again. And in my day, when you disfigured yourself, that was pretty much it. And I liked it that way.
You couldn't even. Oh, you mean like when you want to be badass and you give yourself scars?
Yeah, you were crazy forever when you did things like that.
Yeah, well, I've had to explain it to doctors for the past 30 years. Yeah, I just wanted to look badass. Rick is kind of humble. What happened was this. Rick is from is it New Mexico or Arizona? New Mexico.
Yeah, Rick is from New Mexico, and he came upon in the middle of the desert a bunch of bikers, and he had to fight them off. They all had
only
knives.
A slide rule.
It turned out that a lot of them stabbed him, but he was holding up his pants with a rattlesnake, and he pulled it out and scared them off, and that's how he got those scars. That and also there are a lot of women will dig their nails into his chest just before they realize that they love him, and it ends up okay. So, what were you going to say about medical science curing people?
No, I agree with you that lifespans are going to get much longer. Even the UN, which is a fairly conservative organization, you know, when it comes to predicting stuff, says the average lifespan within our lifespans is going to go to 100. And it's going to, you know, one of the engines of our economy is people dying, because then jobs turn over, people get too old to work, then they die, jobs turn over, wealth turns over, and they make room for babies. And if people take longer and longer to die, then it's going to lead to all sorts of weird stresses on the economy. And not just the economy, but on families. And like, you know, if you're 40 and you're out there, you know, in the in the Tinderverse, looking for your next partner, and your mom, who's 70 but looks 28 thanks to medical technology, is out there in the same arena competing with you for partners, that at the very least is a bunch of Kate Hudson movies.
I think what part of the thing with this is that you don't really understand it because you're in it. So it's hard to know. They once asked George Harrison what it was like to be a Beatle. And he said, well, I've never been anything else, so I don't know. In my opinion, when I read about families in the Civil War where everybody dies, just, you know, they lose 2 sons in battle or to illness, then there's a rubella epidemic or a whooping cough epidemic and they lose their daughter. I think it made people more resilient. They were more able to deal with hardship.
People died like crazy. The Bronte sisters, of literary fame, there were like 5 sisters and 1 brother. Only one of them made it past 30. The oldest Bronte sister only made it to 38. And yet they wrote a bunch of books that are still read today. Jane Austen didn't even make it to 42. People died like crazy. You go on eBay and you look for jewelry, if you're me, and you know, perhaps most jewelry or just some huge chunk of jewelry from the 19th century was mourning jewelry. Jewelry you wore to show that you were sad because somebody died. I mean, it wasn't a good time.
Well, not only that, but they have this phrase called a funeral parlor. When I was younger, people used to take the body of their loved one to a funeral parlor. Well, what that comes from is that people used to have a parlor in their home for funerals, to view the coffin of whoever had died.
What you're saying is in a well-appointed home, there was a room devoted to the dead.
That's
brutal.
So my argument is that today people get just as upset if they're bullied on the internet as they used to be when their wife died. I mean, I believe people are less resilient today. Now, I can't, that was a wild exaggeration for dramatic effect. But I think it will affect people's character. I think people will be less resilient because they'll be so unused to tragedy. But beyond that...
Oh, can I talk about that for just a second?
Okay. Hold that thought, because I wanted to make another point. Okay. Beyond that, I think there's another issue of people aging differently, where people at 60 look like they're 30. That is going to happen. I believe that. And when it does, people are going to have 50 years to settle down and get married. It'll be very peculiar. It's going to change everybody's how they live their life.
I have
go
a
ahead
statistic.
Go ahead with what you were
All
going
right,
to
well,
say.
before that, I have a statistic that backs you up. Birth rates among every demographic are declining except for women over 40. That is, if you're in your 20s, fewer babies, 30s, fewer babies, 40s, more babies. People will wait longer and longer to have kids if they have kids at all, which sounds like some kind of disaster, that just nobody has kids. On the other hand, all through history, the plague of death that hits everybody, 106 billion people throughout history, all dead, except for, you know, this latest wave of people who will mostly eventually be dead. All that wisdom, all those experiences, wiped out. But if people, you know, manage to pass on that stuff, that's not necessarily the worst thing. It'll be different, but it won't necessarily be horrible. H.G. Wells in The Time Machine presents a future that you're kind of leery of, where you have the Eloi and the Morlocks, where humanity is split into two species, little fairy-like things, special snowflakes, who live above ground and live like fancy lives where everything's nice, and, you know, they have no resilience. And below ground, everything is run by the Morlocks, which are these troll-like, you know, burly monster things that keep the machinery of humanity running, and then eventually, you know, occasionally go up to the surface to grab and eat the Eloi. But I would say that, you know, we both grew up in the bullying era. I don't think, I was bullied some, but so was everybody. And it was thought that a certain amount of bullying toughened you up. But I'm not sure that a reduced tolerance for bullying, which may or may not lead to reduced resilience, is necessarily a horrible thing. I'm saying that, you know, a planet full of you know, more fey, less tough people who are less like Rambo may not necessarily be the worst thing in the world. That there may be other forms of resilience or other forms of addressing the world. Not everybody, you know, has to fight back a motorcycle gang with a rattlesnake.
How do you feel about you being a parent, Rick? It's spare the raw, spoil a child concept.
Well, my wife and I only have one kid, and we're an intact family. And that allowed us to be, there's a term called helicopter parents. They hover over their kid like a drone and try to smooth the kid's path through the world. And I wouldn't say that we were fully helicopter parents, or even that, but like we were interested parents.
Drone parents? A drone maybe?
No, I don't think, I mean, but we were, the having an intact family where both parents were trying not to be assholes to the kid, you know, allowed the kid they eased her way in the world compared to like some kid who has shitty parents. I mean, I'm not saying we're, you know, the parents of the year, but we tried pretty hard. And
can I say what you did with your kid?
Okay.
I can say it about the education?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't think for a minute that Rick wasn't the crazy, outrageous parent. Let me tell you what Rick did. He doesn't even know it. Rick trained that child of his from his earliest years. What was it, an hour a day? Half hour a day did you work with her?
Well, no, let me tell it then. You're talking about the SATs and the PSAT. My kid wanted to get a high score on the SATs and the PSAT. And I've taught the SAT, and I know how you do it. You take as many practice tests as humanly possible.
Something on your arm.
Oh, part of your chair.
One of the Trump campaign, one of the things he wants to do, you got Betsy DeVos, what is the name of the...
Betsy DeVos.
And she wants to have vouchers, right? So for parents who can't afford to send their kids to private schools, she would give them a vouchers.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So, so LeBron James started this school for these kids who get to go to this school, but that's only like 200 kids. Shouldn't the rest of the U.S. also have the opportunity to go to the school of their choice? And how do you feel about that in terms of the would that be a subject better that Don Lemon would have talked about, LeBron James, as opposed to maybe just talking about how Trump was dividing the U.S.? Anyway, feedback on that.
I'll respond. What you're talking about is the scarcity of education. People are very leery of Betsy DeVos because it seems as if she wants to privatize education, which she claims would, subject education to market forces that would somehow make it better. And in a lot of cases, market forces do make some things better, but education on the wholesale scale that she's picturing, it seems unlikely. She's from Michigan, where they've tried some of her stuff and the educational outcomes haven't been good. There's a problem with scarcity of resources in education. Like the LA public schools are largely broke, and there are good programs, but they're tiny because LA public schools don't have enough money to make those programs available to as many students as could benefit from them. That's problem one with education, scarcity. Problem two is that education is no longer as interesting relative to everything else in the culture as it was 100 years ago, when everybody was a frickin' farmer and wanted to get off the farm and into the classroom because that's where the information was. Now the information is everywhere. Your personalized information is on your phone, and you have to put your phone away to sit in class, bored. So I think that there are some future situations that may tend to address both those things. That like elite education, like Ivy League educations are incredibly scarce. That each Ivy League school admits an average of 2,000 students a year, when there are tens of thousands of students who are super qualified, and many more tens of thousands of students who would do perfectly well at these elite schools. But the schools haven't grown to accommodate all the students who could benefit from these schools. But I'm hopeful that online education will democratize education, and that people becoming educated will eventually become getting into good schools, getting a good education outside of these elite schools will become more and more easy and more interesting. And I mean, that's kind of a necessary thing if we want to stay apace of India and China. India, according to this future timeline I thought we might look at, but we may run out of time to look at, will become the most populous country in the world in 2022, 4 years from now. And that's a lot of people. I keep saying India and China have a combined population of 2.5 billion people, which is 8 times the population of America. And if those people are super committed to education, they will kick our asses just demographically. America needs to get better at educating more of its population if we want to keep up with the demographic wave of educated people coming from these accelerating huge countries. Lance.
All right. It's all the fault of the Democrats. In the beginning, the teachers' unions are what elect the California politicians. So when I talk about California, what I'm talking about is what the Democrats want for all of you in the United States watching this. The first thing is that light is driving me crazy. The buzz is just insane, and it's going to bother people. Can I turn it off?
Yeah.
All right. Let's edit that out.
We can do that.
Rick?
Sure.